On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 61, created on November 15th, 2023. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight I'm drinking 2023 Surly Darkness.
I'm having a beer from the Imprint Brewing Company called I Was in the Pool.
My beverage is a mixed drink called a Savoy Hotel, made with Benedictine and brandy. All right, you can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Lots to cover this episode as we have 2 days in Pittsburgh to talk about, including that Packers at Steelers matchup. And we're going to look ahead to both Week 10, the gold package game with the Chargers, and Week 11, a short week on to Detroit. And that'll bring us to a little bit of a history as well. But first, 2 big days in Pittsburgh. Not 3 strange days, Neil, but 2 days in Pittsburgh. You had a good time in the city along the Three Rivers area. Tell us what happened on the waterfront.
Pittsburgh's, first of all, a lovely city. It's the home of my favorite modern baseball stadium, PNC Park. I had been there previously, really had enjoyed the downtown area. One of the things that's great about Pittsburgh and getting to the stadiums, you can be in downtown, nice restaurants, walk across these beautiful yellow or gold steel bridges into the stadium district. You walk by PNC Park, you walk over to the football field, and it's really nice to be able to just walk from your hotel out to the field. And that access that you have, that walkability is something that I really appreciate about Pittsburgh. But also, Pittsburgh is Three Rivers Stadium, but the entire area is surrounded by hills. And so you have great aesthetics, not just from the rivers, but also from all of the hills overlooking everything. It's a really enjoyable city to drive into. It is, I think, one of the most underrated cities in America to visit. I got into Pittsburgh on Saturday night and had dinner at one of the very nice restaurants in downtown Pittsburgh. And one of the things that I noticed immediately just sort of walking down as we were waited to be seated in our restaurant was that there was a pretty sizable grouping of Packers fans, but also a lot of people that were Steelers fans that were wearing their black and gold jerseys around. And that spirit that Pittsburghians have for their teams and the fact that all of their teams have a black and gold color scheme is certainly something that came through. Went out later on that evening, went to several different places, and I was wearing a Packers sweatshirt, and everywhere somebody was calling me aside to say, hey, I want to talk about your team. I want to talk about my team. It was a very friendly atmosphere going out to several different bars in Pittsburgh, and specifically every place I went. It's like, hey, I want to talk about the Steelers. I want to talk about how the Packers, what do you think about the game? Some good natured ribbing, but it was an extremely friendly atmosphere, much as you might get in Green Bay on the day before a game. And very much in contrast to what you get going out in Philadelphia. And I would say that the people in Pittsburgh very much like to contrast themselves from their rivals across the state. That made for a very enjoyable weekend as far as talking to people.
And you did share with us, certainly on social media, which was great. We got to use all of our outlets there. Saturday night looked like a lot of fun. And it sounded like Green Bay fans really did, as you said, infiltrate the city. Our team does travel well. We certainly appreciate that. But what was Sunday like? You got up early. You did some tailgating. We can see you there with the Yinzer mob. Neil, how did they treat you?
They were really fun. First of all, I walked across one of the bridges into the stadium district and just sort of enjoyed and absorbed all of the atmosphere around the stadium. It was probably 4 hours before game time when I was walking through, and the parking lots were certainly filled around the stadium. There was a lot of activity. Got to see the Steelers band playing, walk along the waterfront, see beautiful views of the waterfront. But again, even as I'm walking around, and there's again, maybe 10, 15% of the people are Packers fans overall in the day, even Steelers fans that I would just sort of walk by casually would want to talk about the game, talk about my team, talk about their team, talk about what my predictions were for the game. It was just very friendly on game day as well. The Yinzer Mob is a tailgating party that is in the Tailgate Hall of Fame, much like the Lot 1 tailgate in Scott Schwartz. And so I had been recommended to go over to the Yinzer Mob. Now, it was kind of an interesting place to go. As you can see, right, there's some industrial fencing behind. It was essentially a lot between 3 buildings where they basically just set up a game day party. And by the time I left, it was maybe 150 people who were there. But it was a little bit weird in that it was completely separate from the normal place within the stadium district. You had to go a few blocks away. way, but it was certainly a very open atmosphere, a very welcoming atmosphere as far as Packers fans. And the guy that I'm with in the photo here, he's holding his Tailgate Hall of Fame badge that the members of the Inzer Mob have. And I enjoyed talking to not only fans of the Steelers, there were a lot of Packers fans who were there. I got to talk about Bart Starr being the last person to win a game in Pittsburgh, which is unfortunately still the situation. But also, interestingly, met with a group of UK fans, a group of about 15 traveling UK fans who were doing a barnstorming tour going over the course of 3 weeks to something in the range of 10 different stadiums or NFL and college games. They went immediately from Pittsburgh up to Buffalo the next night for the Monday Night Football game. And it was fun talking to these UK fans, significant group of them Raiders, but also Ravens, and seeing their viewpoint on just enjoying the tailgating. As I said, there is nothing like tailgating for games that they go to in the UK. Even for the NFL games that they play in the UK, there's no place to tailgate around Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which of course is a shithole, so there wouldn't be. But globally, right, it's in the middle of a city and it's just not part of the atmosphere. And they were certainly taking in and enjoying all of the elements of tailgating that day.
I like that you brought up Buffalo the next day for the UK fans. And that's what I wanted to ask, comparing this to Buffalo, because remember when we were in Buffalo, yes, there's the team controlled lots around the stadium. And then there were the private lots, and those private lots didn't have to abide by the 4-hour rule. Same thing around Lambeau Field. We have the team controlled lots. We've got that 4-hour rule. So where the Inzer Mob was, it sounds like they were able to get there earlier. They didn't have to abide by those team and NFL rules with that parking lot where they were.
Yeah, it's just an industrial lot essentially. So they can do whatever they want. But what I will say that is in contrast to Lambeau and is in contrast to Buffalo is that the tailgating seems a lot more spread out. It's essentially wherever do we have a parking lot, that's where we're going to be able to set up the tailgate. And certainly there was a concentration right around the stadium where there are a number of lots, and it was very festive there, but the Inzer Mob was away from there. And there were a number of other people that were tailgating in various other more remote locations. And that lack of concentration, I think, was a little bit, I'm not going to say disconcerting, but it was definitely a little bit different than the atmosphere that you have where all of the tailgating is essentially one contiguous area.
Neil, in addition to wandering around, talking with lots of people, what else was going on there?
Pittsburgh is kind of like a big city version of Wisconsin. They are very much into their food and their drinking. And at the Inzer Mob tailgate, they had at least 6 different tables set up for various drinking games that people wanted to play. And people were very enthusiastically taking part. And I would say the Wisconsin and Packers fans certainly were more than participating within the drinking games at the Inzer Mob tailgate.
No. So it looks like they've got pretty much everything there but a shot ski, Neil.
And there was a shot ski as well. I don't think I have a photo of it, but there was solid drinking. And the way that it worked at the Inzer Mob tailgate is you just paid $40 and that gave you unlimited food and drink. And they just sort of, you pick it out. They had coolers set up. They had champagne set up. They had various things. You just sort of, it was everything serving yourself. And there were wristbands because it was an enclosed area that you had to pay to get into. But it was overall exceeded my expectations, despite on my first look at it in this industrial lot, I was like, oh, what am I actually getting into here? But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the Steelers fans. I enjoyed the Inzer Mob. I enjoyed the openness and the friendliness of the entire atmosphere there. It was a great start to a Sunday that didn't turn out perfect, but it was a good way to be initiated into Pittsburgh football culture.
And it looks like you had beautiful weather as well. And then, once you got in the stadium, looks like you ended up with fantastic seats as well.
Yes, Jeff, it was a beautiful day in Pittsburgh, and we happened to be right along the Packers sideline, 6 rows back. In the corner, there was a tunnel next to us, but unfortunately, that was a service tunnel. The Packers had to go across the field to be there, but we were right next to the Packers as they were warming up. We saw a lot of Sean Clifford. We saw a lot of the offensive and defensive linemen. The warm-ups were great. It was a fun start today. There was a good selection of Packers fans around us the entire game.
So what you're saying is you didn't end up with anyone's game-worn gloves or anything like that afterward?
Unfortunately, no. I was really hoping when I saw that we were right next to the tunnel, I was like, oh yes, this is perfect. But no, unfortunately, but that's okay. We had great location and it was a fun day.
Well, let's talk about the game. Oh, what do you got, Jeff? With those seats, Neil, let's talk about the game itself, because there had to have been some action on that end of the field. I know based on just watching the game on TV, knowing where you were, knowing that you got caught on TV as well, what did you see not only in the entire game, but what was really nice to see at your end there.
The Steelers were coming toward us in the first quarter. So unfortunately, the two big Steeler drives in the first quarter, I saw a lot of that action coming toward me. And one of the big questions heading into the game is that we had the Matt Canada offense that had not gone over 400 yards for 55 straight games against the Joe Barry defense. Neither of these a brain trust. And yet on the Steelers' first drive, they drove all the way straight down right at us with a series of different big plays. And the defensive pass interference on Valentine on that first drive. And that was coming right at me. I have to say that defensive pass interference must have been earlier in the play because there was no contact with them anywhere near when the ball was coming through. And yeah, finally they score the touchdown on 1st and goal where they just sort of walk right in against our defense. And even before the Steelers had handed the ball off, you could already see the gap in the line and the fact that, yeah, they're going to score here. I just had no confidence even before the ball was handed off that we were going to be able to stop them on that 1st and goal from the 4. And that seemed to set a tone. That was certainly discouraging that they moved the ball so well on their first drive. And again, right on their second drive, they did the same thing. So first drive, 9 plays, 76 yards. Second drive, they started their 40 because our asshats can't keep the ball in bounds. 11 plays, 60 yards, and scored a touchdown in the first play of the second quarter. I saw a lot of movement from Pittsburgh down in my direction.
The defensive pass interference was, let's call it dubious, and obviously huge because it was on 3rd and 2. They were coming your way, but let's talk about the Packers and their first quarter. Now, what a shocker. So you've got two essentially moribund offenses and a flurry of first quarter points.
Unbelievable, right? And, just starting out with our first play, a 9-yard pass to Christian Watson, and then 2 plays later, a 14-yard pass to Christian Watson. We moved the ball down the field in a way that we don't expect the Packers to do this year, certainly. And what a relief as far as that was concerned. And that first touchdown to Dobbs is at the literal exact opposite corner of the field as where I was. But even then, it was just like you saw the ball go up and going towards Dobbs. It's like, yeah, this was lofted absolutely perfectly. I would say one thing that was nice about our seats, just at the height that it was, is that I got to see the direct lines of passes on a number of different plays, and that was pretty fun. But it was stunning to see the Packers follow up that first Steelers drive with their own touchdown drive. And I felt good at that point, and then immediately felt crappy because Pittsburgh came down and scored that touchdown in the end at the beginning of the second quarter. But a first quarter that our offense at least moved the ball. I'll say that's positive. We scored 7 points. This game was tied 7-7 first quarter, but I think the overall numbers do say the greater Pittsburgh dominance. So 9 first downs to 4 for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh converted 3 out of 3 third downs, and on their first drive, they actually converted 4 third downs because a defensive pass interference, even though it's on third down, does not count in NFL statistics as a third down conversion. And overall, the Steelers actually converted on either 3rd or 4th down 5 of their first 6 opportunities for a conversion. It was not looking good for the Joe Barry defense at the start of the game. And actually, at the end of the first quarter, I looked up the numbers, and I was most concerned because, again, Steelers had not gone 400 yards of offense in 55 games. They had 98 yards of offense in that first quarter. This is like, oh shit, the Joe Barry defense is actually going to allow the Steelers to do what they seemingly can't do.
Where we got our touchdown drive right in the first quarter there, that was also on a big kickoff return. Keyshawn Nixon, 36-yard kickoff return. So it was like, okay.
Time out. We only got to the 31. We were 6 yards ahead of where we would have been if we'd let the ball go into the end zone. 6 yards ahead. That 36, like Keyshawn Nixon had great stats, but that's because, again, he almost always starts inside the end zone. A 36-yard kickoff return is not that impressive when you start 5 yards deep. It was decent, but it wasn't a huge kickoff return or anything like that. We got one of those in the second half, but that first half one was definitely not the asshats greatly overperforming. It was basically undoing some of the other fuck ups they had on other kickoff returns elsewhere in the game.
And the asshats in general had a rough day. I was, pointing off the kickoff return, but after Steelers go down, so they're up 14-7. Okay, how are the Packers going to respond? Well, they respond with a 2 yards and a 3 and out, right? I mean, it was just like, seriously, what's going to happen? And then the Steelers, after a 43-yard punt, so the Steelers get the ball back, and what do? they go down and kick a field goal. I mean, this was like, what is going on here? How can this Steelers offense look this good?
And just continuing on that point, the Steelers' second touchdown and their first field goal, both their starting field position was the Pittsburgh 40 and the Pittsburgh 46. So our asshats certainly made a contribution to the Steelers getting 10 of their points in that game.
Also, at the beginning of that Steeler drive, getting it at their own 46 right after that crappy punt, then the sack is nullified because of the illegal contact penalty, right? So it's just like, oh, come on. What more is going to go wrong here?
The Steelers got 3 first downs in the first half from Packers defensive penalties, and that combined with some asshattery is not a formula for success. But thankfully, after those first 2 drives, especially, or those first 3 drives for sure, the Steelers offense decided, oh, wait, we're the Steelers offense. We're going to play like the Steelers offense. We're going to get overly conservative. We are going to not do any sort of modern playmaking. And yes, they did score 2 more field goals in the second half, but they were a different team after those first 2 drives in their offense. And it's not because Joe Barry dialed up the pressure, did anything different. Joe Barry kept doing the things that he did in the first 2 drives. He kept putting 2 down linemen on, saying, wow, we know that they're going to run the ball, but screw it. Let's just hope this works.
And run it they did. Let's talk about the positive. So the Packers, after the 3 and out, so it's 17-7. And you're thinking, okay, is this going to be the Steeler route? But then all of a sudden the Packers on offense decide, hey, we're going to get some big plays.
Well, 2 big plays, most importantly. But yeah, that's when the 40-yard Dillon run came into play. And then obviously the touchdown pass to Jaden Reed that was perfect. And that was in my side of the field now, although in the opposite corner. But there was some celebrating as far as that's concerned. And yeah, Ben and I made it onto the television crowd shots after that Jaden Reed touchdown. But what a beautiful drive. 87 yards. We started on our own 13 on that drive. We drove it 87. Again, 2 huge plays that were driving that. Also a defensive pass interference. It was on a pass thrown to Watson. I do want to point out. So Watson did make a contribution after the first 6 minutes in a defensive pass interference, at least. So at this point, it's 17-13. All we've got to do is kick an extra point, and it's a 3-point game.
Oh, but
wait a minute.
So fast. And it wasn't that it was missed. It was friggin' blocked.
Yeah, DeGuara is living up to the 3rd round curse, and he actually only had 5 plays on offense in the game, and arguably we should be giving his snaps to Ben Sims, who had 0 snaps in the game. And when you can't do your basic blocking assignment on special teams, that's really bad. I mean, you should not have a kick blocked because essentially the person who's supposed to block just decides, yeah, no, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. And the rest of the half was pretty nondescript, just a bunch of 3 and outs and some punts and a whole bunch of punts. And
but there was one big element that did come into play, and that is on the next drive, the Steelers threw a backwards pass that was returned for a touchdown, a great recovery, returned it for a touchdown, maybe stepped out of bounds, but that was a turning point in the game. It was just beautiful to see our defense finally stepped up. We've been devoid of turnovers all year. We caused that turnover. We took advantage. We scored the touchdown. We took the lead going into halftime.
Or not, right? I mean, and that was one where, watching it on the replay, how can they not? I think because they blew the whistle, I think it was just they were going to say, okay, this is, I don't know, the music that we call it the Pittsburgh City Miracle or something. And it was just, I don't know. It was so obvious from every angle that thing was definitely backwards, and it was a clear recovery. Whether he scored a touchdown or still, it's points. It's a turnover deep in their territory. And I was incredulous. I just it went to New York. It was reviewed. The whole works. Nope. All right. Play on.
And outside of that, 3 other short drives, but it ends up 13-17 at halftime. This is a game that has ups and downs. It has the proverbial growing pains, but Green Bay just does not feel out of the game at this point. One of the things we keep talking about with this team, and Jordan Love in particular, is how well they play in the third quarter. And knowing that they played actually really well in the first half, Neil, there had to have been high hopes going into that third quarter for this team to really strike and do something in this ballgame.
Yeah, and just sort of finishing up on the second quarter statistic, we outgained Pittsburgh 92 yards to 78 in that second quarter. We were outscored 6-10, but it was certainly a case where our offense got going in the first half. We had over 150 yards of offense in the first half. And, for this team this year, that certainly left me very encouraged going into the second half. And we're getting the ball at the start of the second half. So it's a perfect situation, drive down the field and score, and let's take this lead and never look back. And it started out perfectly. Keyshawn Nixon actually did have a really big return, got to the Pittsburgh 44 with that big kickoff return.
Yeah, it was a 49-yard return, and it wasn't one of those, oh, what the hell is he doing? And he came out, and it was great. So this is where it was sort of telling, where the offense was moving and they had a big fourth down conversion as well on this one, a 4th and 6, where, hey, they didn't line up off sides. What a concept. But they get into the red zone. And this is where they've almost manufactured ways to lose. And so they're moving up and down the field. They've got big chunk plays, good long passes, that big long run, the good kickoff returns, and they get into the red zone and just completely stop.
Yeah, they got all the way down to the Pittsburgh 13, but that last series, a 1-yard run for Jones, a 0-yard pass from Love to Jones, and an incompletion. And yeah, they just decided, nah, this is not what we're going to do. And certainly it's been an issue all year for the Packers getting into the red zone, but then not scoring. And that ended up being the downfall in this game. And this was the second drive of the last 3 where the Packers started the ball somewhere around midfield and came away with either nothing in the drive at the end of the first half where they started at their own 46. Here they started Pittsburgh's 44. They only advanced the ball 30 yards and they didn't take advantage of those opportunities. It's that not taking advantage of those opportunities you have that ended up being the difference in the game.
Absolutely. And so it should have been tied, but it's 17-16.
We still made the field goal. Yes. Let's be fair here.
Yeah, but it was a chip shot. But hey, at least there was blocking for it, which is nice. So then the defense steps up, right? Or one might say the Pittsburgh offense plays down to their expectations, and they're 3 and out. So the Packers get the ball back again and have another opportunity and some big plays. Once again, big plays by Mr. Love.
A 20-yard pass to Dobbs, 15-yard pass to Musgrave, pass to Reed. Jones making some contributions as far as the running is concerned. We started our own 22. We advanced all the way to the Pittsburgh 10, but unfortunately we advanced to the 10 and then did the same thing that we did on the previous drive where we could not make that final step, getting it into the end zone, despite being not just in the red zone, but deep into the red zone. And that ended up being the game. We scored the field goal there. Those ended up being our final points in the game. Although I thought we played well on offense in the fourth quarter, we took a lead. We took the lead. We were ahead 19-17 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. We were in a good position. And with the Steelers offense starting to struggle a little bit in some areas, this was maybe our opportunity. So we did have the lead.
Neil, with that field goal, you're right. We take the lead 19-17. The other thing about that is that's 4 scoring drives to 3 scoring drives as well at this point in the game. This is a game where, as a fan, we felt good about this team. And I think in the stadium, you felt good. Watching it at home, Jeff, we felt good. And it was just something where like, this has got to be a way to put this game away, knowing, like you said, just how dismal maybe the Steelers offense is playing. Unfortunately, it doesn't play that way out in the fourth quarter, but we never really were out of this game either.
Well, and that's been the case most of the season, right? We haven't been really blown out of any games, or the Detroit, that was
one
bad.
Yes.
But we made the score somewhat close. But you're right. I mean, this is one of those things where we have not given up 70 points. So there's been a lot of these crazy swings, and reflecting on this, I don't know if that's what's more frustrating or disconcerting is the fact that they're in most of these games and actually have an opportunity to win and sort of find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, or if it's a matter of just bad luck, bad coaching. I don't even know. Like I said, every week there's sort of something new because it's positive. We were leading and the offense was clicking pretty well, except when they got inside the 20. There's this hope, this this is pretty positive, and there's been some big plays, and yeah.
Well, Jeff, I mean, let's just talk about this in a global sense. So the Packers are 3-6, but we only have a -3 point differential on the year. So Pythagorean wins were like at 500. And I will point out the Seattle Seahawks, who are 6-3 and in the lead for the wild card, they're only -1. So basically two teams that have identical scoring differentials, one's 6-3, one's 3-6. And you can easily see how our season might have gone slightly differently, and we'd be sitting at a 6-3. And yes, it would be a 6-3 that would have an element of mirage to it. And I think that's where Steelers fans were on Sunday. When the game was done, it was not this wild celebration that, oh, we won the game. It's like, okay, we won the game, but the Steelers fans clearly recognize that they are a weak 6-3 team that has a lot of holes, that's got to figure some things out fairly quickly, or nothing really is going to happen beyond making the playoffs and getting knocked out pretty quickly by an actual good team. There was definitely a resignation among those Steelers fans, both pre-game, during the game, and after the game. And I'd rather be in their situation, though. I'd rather be 6-3 and say, wow, we're lucky to be 6-3 and we can think about the playoffs, rather than 3-6 with essentially identical play.
And coming down the stretch, then, just kind of what was going on. After a bunch of punts back and forth, the Steelers managed to cobble together a drive to kick a field goal, which was enough to make it a touchdown game. So we needed that touchdown.
Pittsburgh had two drives, and I think both drives were very different as far as how they got their field goals in the second half. The first one, that was actually right after we took the lead, I think was most disconcerting, because it was basically one passing play, 28 yards, Pickett to Pickens, that moved them essentially to field goal range. They only need two other short runs to kick a 49-yard field goal, and all of a sudden we're behind again. And after a Steelers offense that by passing had been doing basically nothing all game, to be beaten by that pass and the one play hurt. And then that second drive that you talked about, that was just a methodical Steelers drive with an 11-yard run, 6-yard run, 20-yard run, 4-yard run, 8-yard pass. They just moved the ball down the field against our defense in that one drive. That was sufficient for them to take that 4-point lead that now put us in a little bit more, I wouldn't say it shouldn't have put us into desperation mode, but we certainly realized that our backs were against the wall and we had to do something. We had to do it relatively soon.
And the offense did. I mean, they came out, and Love was, at this point, they had pretty much abandoned the running game. But Love was just slinging it in that drive, 28 yards to Musgrave. And then that 3rd and 10, another huge pass to Wicks. I mean, getting different receivers involved and thinking, okay, we're putting something together here. But once again, as we get close to the goal line, goofy shit starts to happen.
But I don't even know how much goofy shit it is. It was that we're down 4 points and we had to play the game differently, down 4 points, than if we were down 3 points. And I really think that arguably the most important play of the game was Josiah DeGuara missing the block and getting the blocked extra point, because that entire fourth quarter plays out differently if it's a 3-point game.
Yeah. Because they just, maybe they get a little more conservative. They run it a few times rather than Love trying to throw it in the end zone. They kick a field goal and the game is tied. Instead, he throws it, maybe forces it. I'm not sure. But again, the bounce. I mean, come on. I mean,
it was a good play by the defender. I'm going to give the defender credit on that one. And I'm going to give our defense credit on the following drive that, yes, it took Pittsburgh 6 plays, but we got the ball back. They only moved it 17 yards. Jordan Love got the ball back with no timeouts and 59 seconds left in the game. Got it at the Green Bay 19.
And what a hell of a first play it was.
Jaden Reed was a beast as far as getting open into the right position, adjusting on the ball. You couldn't have asked for something more perfect for starting a drive where you really do have to go 81 yards in less than a minute.
And that first 46-yard pass on 1st and 10, suddenly we're in Steelers territory. And then we go, kind of bogged down a little bit. And then
it was worse than bogging down. The problem was passing it to Aaron Jones and him running into the middle of the field. That cost us 23 seconds of game time. I have no problems with Jordan Love's interception on the last play of the game. I have a lot of problems with the way the play was called, but you had to throw it into the end zone the way that the Steelers had to defend it. They had 7 D-backs lined up right on the goal line.
Yeah.
And we had 5 receivers running straight routes right at them before essentially cutting in the end zone. It was a play design that had no chance the way that the Steelers had defended it. You have to throw in the end zone. An incompletion does you no good. Throwing it away does you no good. Being sacked does you no good. You've got to at least try and hope that your receiver is going to be able to make a play. But unfortunately, bad play design is what cost us that last interception. But Aaron Jones cost us having to do it desperate at that moment. And I just wonder what we could have done if we had 2 or 3 more shots at the end zone from down in that area.
Yeah, because it wasn't a Hail Mary situation. We were, again, pretty much in the red zone, but just moving the ball with these big plays until
It's frustrating, but the thing is, it's good to be frustrated here,
Yeah.
Jeff, because it means we weren't out of the game. This is a team that we talk about the growing pains. They are feeling them. They're learning now. They're saying, okay, we need a better play here, or we need to make a better decision here. The fact that they were in this game down 4 with over 5 minutes left to play and had multiple opportunities to get in the end zone says a lot about this team at this point of the season.
We've said this. Each of these games seem to come down to 1 or 2 plays. Just the margin of error is razor thin, and it's really a missed extra point that dictates this game. Because had they played just slightly differently, they kick 2 field goals and they win by 2. But that, I mean, if that's, another way to look at it too, because they were both down in the red zone, definitely in field goal territory, those last 2 drives. And just, and overall, the statistics, although, as you say, John, the most important statistic
one, yes.
Yeah, the one on the scoreboard. From a passing standpoint, the one big one that stood out to me was the fact that the Packers were in the red zone 5 times and only scored 1 touchdown, whereas Pittsburgh was 2 of 3. And the other thing is they rushed for 205 yards.
Yeah, and specifically Pittsburgh rushed for 95 of those yards in the 4th quarter. I mean, it was overall even throughout the game, but they really chewed up clock and they really moved the ball down the field in that 4th quarter. Now you can take the opposite viewpoint as far as what we did in the second half. We had 9 total first downs in the second half. All 9 of those first downs were by the passing. Jordan Love was the only reason that we were in that game. We had 0 first downs rushing in the second half. We only had 3 first downs rushing in the entire game. And the Packers had 81 yards passing in the 3rd quarter, 118 yards in the 4th quarter, 199 yards of passing in that second half. I will note we only had 39 yards of rushing in the second half, but our passing game and Jordan Love and some of the receivers, at least, were certainly making themselves known. They were the ones that were keeping us in this game, that gave us those opportunities, not just once, but twice at the end of the game to go ahead and take a lead late in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, and Love, he's close. He still has not had that 300-yard passing game. I mean, this was his closest one. But, I mean, then you look at, Kenny Pickett. 119 yards passing. You wonder how in the hell did Pittsburgh, because there were no special teams touchdowns. Packers, those 2 interceptions obviously were huge at turnovers. The defense didn't force any turnovers. And I think that's the other big thing here. That backwards pass that wasn't, because that was a clear recovery, that would have swung the game. Overall, the takeaway is, yes, we haven't won in Pittsburgh since 1970.
Still,
but we had a hell of an opportunity here, and I think that's what's so frustrating is that if they would have come in there and just shit the bed, right? If they go in there and just suck, then you go, okay, well then there's other things. But in this case, they didn't. They played offensively, at least pass game wise, certainly a better game. It was really our asshats that made the difference, unfortunately.
On the other hand, yes, Pittsburgh only had 324 yards of offense, but they did have 205 yards of rushing, and we knew that was the game plan. Jaylen Warren, 15 rushes for 101 yards, 6.7 yards per attempt for Jaylen Warren. And then Najee Harris, 16 rushes, 82 yards, 5.1 yards per attempt, a touchdown for each of those. Joe Barry defense had an opportunity to play against the opponent that they were playing, and they just chose not to do so. They continually went with 2 down linemen, and I don't know what you're going to call those outside people, whether they're defensive ends or outside linebackers, but it doesn't matter. They went for a game plan that was not the game plan that Pittsburgh was playing. You can't force yourself on another team with a nickel defense. You had essentially a nickel defense on most plays. If the other team is, again, only going to try to throw for 127 yards, which is what they ended up with. They smashed it down our throats, and they did it with a defense that was more than willing to accommodate that, not because the players didn't do their job necessarily, but because they had a scheme that was not set up for the Pittsburgh game plan.
Well, sort of the unsung heroes, perhaps, and we haven't talked about this group. The offensive line seemed to hold up pretty well in this game. TJ Watt, we didn't really hear anything from him. The Packers didn't do fantastic in terms of a ton of rushing yards, but Jordan Love, was able to buy time, or to had time, frankly. And look what happens when he has some time.
He's extending plays. He's using his feet. He's paying attention to what's going on in the field, and he is picking apart. I mean, in particular, that second completion to Christian Watson was a beautiful bullet right down the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
The other big number on the day, Jaden Reed, Neil, you talked about him already.
Yeah.
5 catches for 84 yards. We want to talk about some rookie numbers here. Ooh. Reed has 28 catches, 417 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the season. We're at, roughly the halfway point in game 9. And you almost double those, right? So he's on pace for 780 plus yards on the season, around 55 catches and 8 touchdowns. These are James Jones and Greg Jennings type numbers that Jaden Reed is putting up.
And he's trending up. I mean, each game he seems to be making progress. The number of targets, he's catching the balls that are
there were 5 targets at Jaden Reed. He caught all 5 of them, 84 yards. What this says to me is, let's get some more balls to Jaden Reed, because he's going to make plays if we get the ball to Jaden Reed.
That's my whole point here, because that's what good receivers do. They get open and they're reliable. The elephant in the room is obviously Mr. Watson here. You know what? Hoping that he can figure this out.
Call it a sophomore slump, Let's call it that, and let's move on. Let's get better for next season.
Let's be I was going to say that's the optimistic viewpoint, and I hope that that's the case. But yeah, Christian Watson, 34 routes, 7 targets, only those 2 receptions in the first 6.5 minutes of the game. The other person, though, on offense who decidedly underperformed, and arguably more importantly underperformed, was Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones running the ball, 13 rushes for only 35 yards. He had 4 receptions on 6 targets for only 19 yards. And he had 2 big drops. And then that play at the last drive where he essentially cost us 20 seconds of game time. I don't think there's a whole lot of positives you can take from this game as far as Aaron Jones is concerned. And overall, as far as our running game, essentially we had that huge run by Dillon, and it's great to see Dillon making a big play, but our running game didn't do a lot other than that one play.
Aaron Jones, okay, he had maybe, he had a bad day or had a bad game or whatever. He's not consistently bad. It was just this, maybe, let's call this an anomaly. Like I said, we were in the game. We had opportunities to win. We didn't. It's frustrating, obviously. And I guess we look ahead to next week.
And then going to our defense, obviously the Pittsburgh offense got very conservative, but I noted that Pittsburgh got 5 of their 6 first, third, or fourth down conversions they had opportunities for. They only had 1 third down conversion the entire rest of the game after that first grouping. So now I guess the problem is they had a lot of conversions on first and second down, and those don't come into third down conversion statistics. But nonetheless, there were definitely positive notes as far as the defense is concerned, other than the defensive scheme, other than our front 4 being able to stop their running game. But I really have to put a lot of that on scheme. The other thing that I would put it on is, Quay Walker's kind of a beast as far as stopping the run game. And guess who didn't play that game? Quay Walker. And I think that Quay and Jair both not playing might have been the difference between us winning and losing on Sunday.
And it was a groin injury that has kept Quay Walker out. He did return to practice, so he's recovering. We hope to see him this week. It is a gold package game. That means we get the Milwaukee crowd, the now Los Angeles Chargers coming to town, and it's our throwback week. We're wearing the old 50s jerseys in the dark green and gold numbers.
So it's Clippers week, and just a reminder, they were the San Diego Chargers, but they moved to Los Angeles. Their abbreviation is LAC. That's the same as the LA Clippers. And given the history of futility for both the Chargers and the Clippers, I'm going to use Clippers as their moniker until they actually do something and at least make a Super Bowl or even better, win a Super Bowl. Let's not have it build off of this week's game, however.
Well, the Clippers are coming in with decidedly a better defensive front as well as a better quarterback, I guess, on paper. This is a team that is notoriously a Jekyll and Hyde team. Whether you point at the chart, the Clippers head coach for those woes or just their inability to execute, they're a team that should be better on paper. They don't come to Green Bay very often, but here they are, and it will be a nice late November game for this one as well. And as much as the Rams complained about having to be here in November, let's hope these guys do as well.
John, what's the weather forecast for this week?
Mid 40s and mostly sunny.
So miserable as far as San Diego is concerned, as far as Los Angeles is concerned.
Right.
But obviously a lot warmer than we'd prefer for a warm weather team coming to Green Bay.
So essentially, probably not a whole lot of weather impact here. One of the major impacts, though, on this Clipper team is their defense. So twice this year so far, this season, their defense has given up over 500 yards of offense. Not 400, 500. This could be an offensive shootout at Lambeau.
Yeah, and continuing on Jeff's point, as far as yards per game, the Clippers are 31st in the NFL, allowing 402 yards per game on average. Their pass defense is actually the worst in the NFL, 32nd at 291 yards per game. So maybe we see that first 300-yard passing game for the Packers since December of 2021. Now, the run defense is a bit more stout, but nonetheless, we've got opportunities for our passing offense against this Chargers team. And that's good because I really like Justin Herbert as a quarterback. I like their offensive scheme. I think that we're going to have to score a lot of points. Our defense is going to have to be on top of their game. Now, the one positive for the Packers is that our pass defense is actually ranked 7th in the NFL, allowing only 188 yards per game. So they don't run as much as other teams do. They're only 22nd in running. They obviously have a very good passing game, but it seems at least a strength against strength. And hopefully Jair is there to help that strength. Hopefully we can get some turnovers as well in this game, because that's one area where the Chargers have a huge advantage. They are +8 in turnovers this year, 3rd in the NFL. The Packers are -4 at 24th in the NFL. So we need a few trends to turn around, but we've also got some trends on their defense and our defense that are pointing in our potential direction. And we can hope that, combined with a little bit of fear of the weather, even if it's not real weather, a little bit of fear of the weather, and that's the mental part that I think that is going to be sufficient, we might have some advantages that give us the opportunity to win this game.
One of the things I'd like to see is one of our wide receivers have a 100-yard receiving game. That hasn't happened yet this year, and I really would like to see that. I'd like to see Love go over 300 yards for, again, the first time, and as you alluded to, I mean, if not this weekend, I'm not sure when it's going to happen. Again, confidence builds confidence, and if they can at home, I mean, again, their last home game against the Rams wasn't pretty, but it was one of their more dominant games this year. So again, hopefully a little home cooking, literally, for the as we come into the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. That would be fantastic. I said, I think it's going to be, the offenses are going to be clicking here.
Yeah, the other streak that needs to end this week is the Packers have now gone 7 straight games without scoring 21 or more points. That streak is the longest for the Packers since 1990, 1991, 2 dismal years for the Packers when we went to 10 straight games without scoring 21 or more points. That Chargers defense is perfectly set up for giving us our opportunity to really move the ball, score some points, make some red zone conversions, and hopefully also win the game.
I'll drink to that.
And Jeff, I know you really want this team to eliminate those trick plays as well. Just cut out the bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Let's just play football.
Just, the throwing it back, throwing it around, throwing it to the running back, and stop it. Just stop it. Okay. No jet sweeps. No, just let Love. Hopefully he'll get time again like he had last week, and just pick this worst pass defense in the league apart.
And let's note that tailgating will happen, even though it is a gold package game. The Lot 1 tailgate party is there. green package games, gold package games, doesn't matter what the weather. And so tailgating will be going on. Lot opens up at 8 o'clock for the noon game. So we expect to have some good social media output for Sunday as well. And like you said, let's build on that home win with the Rams. Let's get some home cooking and do something, because this game is followed by another short week. It is another Thursday turnaround with the Detroit Lions. This time it is the heralded Thanksgiving Day matchup. So Green Bay going to Detroit once again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've seen Detroit already this year. They really had a number on us in Lambeau Field. I don't have a lot of faith playing them on Thanksgiving Day. They're good on offense. They're good on defense. Their offense is second in yards per game in the NFL at 406 yards per game. It's evenly split, passing and running, both fourth in the NFL and sixth in points. And their defense is good too. Now, thankfully, their defense is third against the run, but only 20th against the pass. And so our opportunity against Detroit's defense is to take advantage of their weaknesses in pass defense. Hope we get another Detroit shootout, as they have been prone to do, and as they just had last week. And maybe with a shootout, we might have a chance if we can get some turnovers in this game. And I think in the end, this has been that you talk about that edge as far as that we don't have. We get a couple turnovers in a couple games, and we're going to see ourselves be able to turn things around pretty quickly, I think. And one other thing, as far as Detroit, the Packers have now allowed the opposing teams to go over 200 yards rushing in 3 games, Detroit, Atlanta, and now Pittsburgh. We can't make it 4 games when we play Detroit the second time. Our run defense has to step up in order for us to make a game of this.
At the start of the season, I believe, if I recall correctly, all 3 of us did pick this, the Clippers game as a loss, and the short turnaround as a loss for a young team to try to go on the road on that Thursday. It could be a rough week for Packer fans. When we come back, we'll talk about the Taylor Swift effect that may be coming to Green Bay, but we'll worry about that for another podcast. Until then, Jeff, tell us about the Packers and the Lions and the Thanksgiving Day games.
I wanted to draw attention to a game, a Thanksgiving game, that shone brightly in an otherwise dark season of 1986. The Packers at the Lions, November 27th, 1986. This is a game you may not remember. This was a really high-scoring game. The Packers came into the game 2-10 on the season. The Lions were a respectable 5-7. This was under Coach Forrest Gregg. And after the victory in Detroit on this Thanksgiving, the Packers would only win one other time and finish the season at a dismal 4-12. So the game starts out, Lions jump out to a 10-0 lead. Packers score the next 16 points to lead 16-10. Packers came back with a touchdown and go up 23-13. The Lions score the next 24 points, leading late in the third quarter, 37-23. Packers are on the verge, but suddenly there's a Thanksgiving miracle. The Packers outscore the Lions 21-3 the rest of the way, winning the game on an 83-yard punt return for a touchdown by one Walter Stanley. Yay! Yes, the guy that you saw in Denver a few weeks ago. This was the final of his 3 touchdowns that day, and the Packers won a barn burner 44-40. Why do I mention this? Well, my hope is that Green Bay steps up in Detroit on the national stage on Thanksgiving to play a complete game on Thanksgiving Day. Perhaps they can channel some of that magic from that day back in 1986 in 2023.
And I will mention here that episode 62 is going to be coming in 2 weeks. We are going to take off the short week next week. Lots of things going on between deer hunting, Thanksgiving, and the like. So enjoy this podcast. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. With that, gentlemen, any final thoughts?
One of the things that the Packers have had issues with is these long drives that they've allowed. But the other problem that we've had, and we saw this in the couple of field goals against Pittsburgh, is explosive plays. The Packers defense is actually 5th in the NFL in the most explosive plays they've allowed. But of course, we've had a lot of injuries on defense, and I'm going to point specifically to the Chargers game. The Chargers are 2nd in most explosive plays allowed. We get some turnovers, we make some big plays, we take advantage of the weaknesses in their pass defense. We're in a position where we can win a game that on paper we have no business winning. Go Pack, go.
We've covered I think it's going to be a barn burner in Green Bay for the Clippers, and another high scoring game, hopefully in Detroit. They'll channel 1986 perhaps. And we've got 2 high scoring games, and hopefully they can come out with at least 1 victory over the next 2 games.
All right, and tailgating on Sunday, and let's hope for a feast on the following Thursday. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave a comment for us. You can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Spotify. And you can find us on Facebook at the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.